What's up, sneaker people? It's your boy FB Kicks and Gear, and I am back with another legit check guide. And I'm gonna be honest, I did not think that this video would ever come because I didn't think I was gonna actually get a pair of the Jordan 1 Low Travis Scott Phantoms, but things worked out. A trade that I came across worked out in my favor. I was able to get rid of some duplicate shoes that I had in my closet, and I was able to get a pair of these in exchange, and now I can go and do this video for you. I'm gonna be honest, this is one of the first times that I genuinely struggled to really tell the difference between two shoes. So much so that I had to go and lace the rep pair so that I could more easily do this without getting confused. So that, not all that said, that's not to say there aren't ways to be able to tell them apart, but I had to do this for my own sake. This is a pair that I have reviewed before, so I will either link the video or do a pop-up or something like this so that you can see the original review, but I've held on to these just in case I did get an authentic pair, and I did. So here we are, the Travis Scott Jordan 1 Low Phantoms, and let's kick off this video. And the first thing that we're gonna do, just like we do in every single video, is we're gonna take a look at the box and packaging. First thing I noticed is that the boxes come in these very light cardboard sleeves, and even as light as the cardboard sleeve is, it's definitely flimsier on the rep pair than it is on the authentic pair, for sure. And as you can see, there are all of these embossings, debossings, or whatever you want to call them. A lot of these things that are on here, on the authentic box, they are so much more prominent. You can feel them, they stand out more, they're more bold. On the rep, they are super shallow and thin. They're shiny, they're glossy just like the authentic pair, but they're definitely not as they're definitely a lot more shallow on the rep than they are on the authentic pair. And then when you look at the box labels, the size labels actually look incredibly similar. It's really hard to tell. When I do my checks on this, what I like to look for are discrepancies in the weight and boldness of the letters, but they look exactly the same to me. You guys tell me, what do you think? I might say that there is very, very, very slight weight differences, super slight. I had to pay really hard attention to this, but if you look in the color code down here, they're just a little bit more bold than on the authentic pair. And that might just be because they might be just a little bit more compressed than anything, but super hard to tell. I don't think I'd be able to tell without knowing. And one thing that I do know for sure is that my authentic pair has an RFID chip behind there, and this rep pair doesn't. There are some reps that do come with RFID chips, but this one does not. You can kind of see that behind the size label here. Other than that, the boxes themselves look fairly identical. My authentic pair obviously is a little bit more matte for sure. It looks like the box itself on the rep is shinier than the authentic pair, like I said, and maybe just like a darker black, or maybe that's just the effect that this being so matte looks like it's lighter than the rep pair. But those are the boxes, not much else to say beyond that. And before we get into the shoes, we do know that these shoes come with these bandanas. They come with two bandanas. This right here, the wrinkled one, is the authentic one, and this really, really fresh one is the rep. And from what I can see, there are definitely just slight differences in color. You can see that the authentic one is just a little bit more, especially when it comes to this purple color, it's just a little bit lighter. Also, the images on the authentic one are not as crisp as the rep. You can see it in the Jumpman. Let's see if I can get up close. Notice how the edges on the Jumpman aren't really crisp or defined, but when you look at the rep, it's super defined and super crisp. Let's see if I can easily do this in a side by side. You can get a better sense of the color difference, but also how the rep is just, the edges are a lot more defined. And that goes throughout the entire thing. Other than that, let's take a look at the reverse on the Rep bandana. It's a lot more faded. You can see the difference in that texture. The Rep one over here, the authentic one here. Other than that, the Rep one is it definitely feels thicker, feels heavier. The authentic one is more flimsy, more like a bandana. This one just feels, I don't know, it just feels sturdier. But these all go in the box. They wrap the shoes. It's not really that important, but when it comes to legit checking, that's something you should pay attention to. Well, all that said, let's get rid of these bandanas and let's look at the shoes. So this is actually the first time I'm actually doing a really deep dive into the authentic one. I haven't paid much attention to it since I got it probably about 2 weeks ago or so. And I mean, they're a good looking shoe. They're a good looking shoe. They are probably at the bottom of my list when it comes to the Travis Scott 1 lows. And I still don't know how I feel about the olives that are coming out on the 26th of April. But yeah, I'm not sure. Here's a quick 360 of the shoe and a quick 360 of the Rep. And the first thing that I will say, if we take a look, is the Rep actually looks and feels kind of bigger than the authentic pair. It just feels like it's a bulkier shoe. That's really hard to look at when you're looking at it by itself, but it definitely feels like the Rep is a bigger, bulkier shoe. But when we look into the materials themselves, there are very slight differences in the black nubuck. The nubuck on the authentic pair is a little bit ashier, while the nubuck on the Rep it's darker, but it's also got slightly more of a longer nap than the authentic pair. So when you brush your finger past it, you can see that motion that you just don't see on the authentic pair. But going from that nubuck, let's talk about the suede. It's hard to describe the suede on the Bantams. It's not like regular suede. It feels like it was brushed up and then matted back down. So it's got a texture, but it's also got this weird almost treatment to it that makes it look shiny but textured, hairy but flat. And this is one of the things that I noticed right off the bat when it came to the Reps. They kind of get it, but they kind of don't. If you look at, especially when you look at the back heel here, you see how it is flat, but when you look at the Rep, it's just, it looks similar, but it's a lot more textured and it's a lot hairier. So it's like, there's like a step missing between the authentic pair and the Rep. You can see that the materials are very similar, but especially when you look at that back tab right here, look how hairy the nap is on the suede here. But when you look at the authentic pair, the texture's there. It just looks like it's patted down, matted down. The same thing goes on the side here. You can see the texture. It's very, very similar, but it just, I don't know what it is. It's just, it gives the Rep pair a different look. And I think that really ties into the shoe, where it's predominantly black, but all of the different materials and textures really give it a lot of contrast. So that's the best way I can describe it. The suede on the Reps is just different. The best way you can really see it is when you take a look at that back shot. And when you look at the other shoe, where the B is, it's definitely more aggressive on the back, and you can actually see the nap of the suede poking out under the different black areas of the embroidery. So that's something that you can take a look at. Definitely, now that I've seen these in person, now that I've handled them in person, I can really easily tell the difference. Not that it's something that stands out aggressively, but this is definitely a really good legit check indicator. I think there's a lot of things that Jordan Brand does, especially when it comes to the collabs where they try different materials out. They really set the authentic pairs apart because it's hard for the replicas to replicate. Overall, they did a really good job, but it's just different. And then when you look at the inner sock liner, it's definitely a lot nappier. It's more textured. They feel very similar, but slightly different colors, and whatever they did here, they just did it a lot more on the Rep. Other than that, they look almost identical. Other than the slight color differences, the stitching looks exactly the same, maybe a little bit wider stitching on the rep than on the authentic pair. The Nike Air on the tongue, they're the same color. I've seen reps where the Nike Air color is completely white when it shouldn't be. It is almost like a very, very light muted gray. When you take a look at the cactus in here, a lot of reps have a very, very bold cactus jack. What you like to see is the stitch engaging with the C. When you look at the rep, it definitely does that. Mine is a little bit higher on the authentic pair, but this is definitely in line with authentic pairs that I've seen. The one thing I will say is that while the cactus jack isn't as bold as I've seen on other reps, it's definitely a little bit more glossy than the authentic pair is. The name of the game when it comes to this cactus jack thing is it's supposed to be a very subtle feature. So when you go to the Travis Scott 1 highs, any of them, or the lows, if you see it sticking out super aggressively, you know that it's a rep. This does it a lot better, and this is probably why I kept this one over the other ones that I've reviewed. But it's still a little bit more glossy and bold than the authentic pair, but they feel very similar. Let's go to the midsole. You can see that the midsoles are the same color. Ironically, this is probably the only Travis Scott 1 low rep that matches the color of the authentic pair because it's black. All of the aged sale midsoles on the reps never match the authentic pair ever, but these do a really good job. They match. When you go to the bottom, most people don't realize it, but the bottom isn't pure black and it's not the exact same color as the midsole. It is almost a dark navy blue, and I gotta say, I think the reps look exactly the same. Obviously there's texture differences here, but nothing that you can look to from a legit check perspective. If I had to look at the color, I would say that there might be a very, very, very slight color discrepancy, but it is so slight that I can barely see it. Before we move on to the laces, I just want to do a check on the shape of the toe boxes. I'd say that these look identical in terms of shape. Maybe the authentic pair of the toe box is just a little bit slimmer, but the reps are pretty damn slim. I will say though that the toe box material, just like other Jordan 1 low Travis Scotts, the material comes up a little too high up onto the top of the toe. What you want to see is that it stops right before it creeps up, but the reps kind of travel a little bit too far. But other than that, I am very, very, very impressed. You guys know that I famously talk about the gap between the Nike Air and the Cactus Jack, but there is a decent gap on these, probably about 1 or 2 stitches worth of space. The gap on the rep is a lot smaller, which is good. This is something that I like to see. They definitely, when it came to the fragments, it was something that was like an anomaly where it was very, very close for certain sizes that were larger than a 12.5, 13 tend to have wider gaps, while sizes that were 11.5 and lower had smaller gaps. It's definitely not as restrictive from the mochas to these, but as long as the gap isn't huge, and by huge I mean as long as the gap doesn't look like this when you are a size 11 and below, you're in good shape. This is a rep Travis Scott 1 low fragment that I had from back in the day. I mean back in the day, but before I got my authentic pair. And you can see that gap is large. But other than that, when you look at, the only real other thing to look at here is the laces. The red laces are more or less the same color for the most part, but when you look at the speckled laces, there is a very, very slight difference, and it's something that I have picked up on, and I knew to look for this because I knew this was going to be the case. But when you look at the checkered laces, the checkered pattern here, specifically the white, is not supposed to be a pure white. It's actually an off-white or a sail, and it's really hard to pick up here, but the authentic pair is just a little bit more creamier of a white than the white of the rep laces. In summary, there isn't really a lot to look at because just like most Travis Scott 1 lows, they're really close. But in summary, the easiest thing to pick up on, make sure that you're seeing some cream in these laces and they're not pure white when you look at the black. But most importantly, pay attention to the suede. Look for that matted down effect. That's what I look for in these. And you can see it, it's weird, it's gloss. It looks like they treated this with like wax or something like that. If they look really, really hairy, especially up here on the back, you know that you're looking at a rep. And I gotta say, this is probably the most menial legit check that I've done. I feel like when it comes to Travis Scott 1 lows, I can nitpick to death because a lot of those nitpicking are important things that you can look at. But when I look at these, I don't see a lot of differences. A lot of it just comes down to shape, comes down to texture. Because these are an all black shoe, colors don't really play that huge of a role, but if you know what an authentic pair looks like, you should still be able to legit check. So stay safe out there, guys, because these are hard. But with all that said, isn't much else to look at. This is a shoe that I didn't plan on getting, but hey, you know, when you do shoe reviews and you collect shoes, you stumble upon deals that you can't say no to. So that's what happened with these. But with all that said, guys, I can't wait to do more videos. I got a lot more shoes coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.